Through 2 days in training camp, we've heard it essentially nonstop. What is the Magic Way? Today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is October 2nd. It will be October 3rd, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we've heard the Magic, Jamal Mosley, Jeff Weltman even talk about the Magic Way. Maybe we've been dancing around the issue, but it's time to put a definition behind the coach speak. What is the Magic Way today on Locked On Magic? We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. First, I want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll talk a little bit later on in the show about what's actually going on at training camp, but we're 2 days in. They're still working on details. They're still working on things. There's mistakes being made. We're not seeing a lot in practice. I'll give some observations and thoughts of what I have seen from shooting drills, but frankly, it's not enough to really tell you much. I hate to say this, but we're all kind of holding our breath for Monday. Don't forget about the live show Monday at 7 p.m. as we recap the Magic's game against New Orleans Pelicans. But, I like to think big picture still. And there's been a repeated phrase that has come up over and over again from Jamal Mosley specifically, talking about this is the Magic Way. This is our process. Trust the process. We talked about that yesterday. We're going to get into more coachisms because I love in training camp finding the coachisms, finding the phrases that they're feeding us, that they're giving the media, and defining them. If that's the language they want to use to define the season, let's define these terms. Let's define what this means so we have proper expectations, a proper standard to hold them to. Honestly, I wish they'd, even on background, tell us this stuff so we can say, okay, this is what they're trying to get to. Let's see if they get there. Let's actually have the clear understanding of what that is. But what inspired me to do this episode is that this doesn't just seem like coach speak. I was listening to Jeff Weltman on the Orlando Magic Pod Squad earlier today. And Jeff Weltman closed, the last question that Dante Marchitelli asked was about the lessons of Game 7. The Magic actually shared that clip. It was really probably the best answer of the whole deal, of the whole episode. And Jeff Weltman mentioned this idea of the Magic Way. First off, he said you could say in that locker room that team was ready to go, that team was going to internalize that loss and use it as fuel to get better, to be a more mature team, to be back in that moment again. But he said, this is the Magic Way. These players are embodying what we want them to embody. And ultimately, this whole project, this whole rebuilding project that the Magic are trying to accomplish, that the Magic are trying to do, it starts with the people in the building. And the reason why the Magic have been successful is they have players who have bought into this ideology. But giving us this buzzword like heat culture or, Spurs, being Spursy or whatever it is. I don't know if any other team has heat culture's obviously the most prevalent. That the Magic are seemingly defining a clear set of principles, a clear kind of mantra, a clear idea of who this team is and what it means to be an Orlando Magic player. They seem to have this very clear sense of what an Orlando Magic player is. And what an Orlando Magic player does on the court. And it's all encompassing. It's not just about, oh, they're long. Of course, they have positional length. They're willing and able to play multiple positions. We'll get to lineups here in a minute. It's, of course, they defend. This team's identity is its defense, the number 2 or number 3 defense in the league last year, a team that aspires to be the top defense in the league this year and very much believes they're going to be better defensively this year than they were last year, which is kind of terrifying. It's about the kind of people who are giving. Jeff Weltman spoke about this on Media Day. He repeated this on the Pod Squad, that Paolo Banchero gets it. That while he has individual goals and individual accolades, he understands the individual accolades he's seeking only comes from the team's success. And Contavious Caldwell-Pope said the thing that he was most surprised by in his first kind of times playing with Paolo Banchero is his playmaking, is how unselfish he is. The fact that your star player at 21 years old has that in his DNA, has that winning mentality in his DNA, that proliferates to the rest of the roster. And obviously, Weltman hinted at this on Pod Squad, and I think you can kind of sense this from listening to them talk too. Both Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, I think, understand that they have to take on a more vocal and more prominent leadership role in this team. Even though they are 21 and 22 years old respectively, or 21 and 23 years old respectively, they are the leaders of this team. They are the key players. They are the guys everybody's going to turn to, and they have to be vocal and keep everyone on task, or keep everyone motivated, or keep, do the intangible things that honestly could be the ups and downs of this season because they're still learning how to do all that. The Magic have this spirit, this intense spirit of hard work. They want to work. They want to get on the floor. They want to get grimy. They want to do that work. They not only want to do that work, they find joy in that work. For as much as we want to talk about the Magic being more serious and approaching this training camp and approaching this season with a new level of seriousness, a new level of intensity, and a new level of focus, it still starts, as Jamal Mosley keeps putting it, it still starts with approaching each day with joy and enjoying the company, enjoying your teammates, enjoying this act of playing basketball, this game, keeping that part in perspective. It's about the camaraderie and the togetherness of this group. And yes, they've been together now for 3+ years. This will be year 3 with Jamal. This will be year 4 coming up with Jamal Mosley, but this roster's largely been kept intact. The key pieces for the last 3 seasons. There is a very tight bond with this group. They are very, very tight. And the Magic are hoping that allows them to hold each other accountable in a very real way, as I mentioned yesterday, that it's not just talk. It's not just anything else. It's that they can really be competitive, go after each other and say, hey, we need you to be in this rotation. We need you to do this, X, Y, and Z. And everyone knows that comes from a place of love. That comes from a family. And that might be the biggest thing. And that starts with Jamal Mosley. Goga Bitadze spoke about this in an interview and spoke about it again at Media Day. The reason why he is still with the Orlando Magic, even though he may have had other offers and frankly may have had bigger offers to play elsewhere, this is his family. This is a place that welcomes you into the group. That Jamal Mosley is someone who asks you about your personal life and, make sure you are a complete person as much as you are a complete basketball player. This feel like this is a project, obviously. And you can say all this stuff. You can trademark all these buzzwords. You can do all of that stuff. None of it matters if you aren't successful. If you don't win, none of that matters. Guess what? The Magic won last year. The Magic put themselves in a position to do all of these things, to make all of this stuff feel meaningful, to trademark a lot of this stuff, or these buzzwords feel like they have some weight and significance to it. Look, we're 2 days into training camp. I'll do some updates. I'll do some observations and thoughts from what people have said, but it's far too early to make any judgments. At this point, the Magic are just laying down foundations. They are not getting into the complex stuff. I can't tell you what new wrinkles there are. We don't know. Everyone will tell you that these early days are about just getting back on the floor together, reinforcing the defense that was so successful last year, putting in that base offense, the read and react, beginning to understand where everyone's going to be on the floor, getting your communication up, tightening up those basic things so you can begin to add layers on top of it. This is about the foundation. It's the real simple stuff. But as everybody has said over the last 3 days now, it's the simple stuff that means the most. It's getting this stuff right that will allow you to play into May and June, which is the ultimate goal here. It is doing this hard work now that sets you up for that future. And the Magic believe they have a culture that makes that easier. That culture will be tested, of course. Eventually, they will have to add new players. That continuity element may be adjusted and tempered a little bit. We'll see what happens to accountability and to camaraderie when adversity does hit and how this team does respond. At the end of the day, yes, as much as we want to talk about the team, the Magic need Paolo Banchero to be an all-NBA player. They need Franz Wagner to be a significantly better player. There is a lot on their plates. But the Magic believe they have a culture, as much as Jeff Weltman hates that word. He trademarked a culture word. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it that, Jeff. They believe they have a way of doing things. And if they have a way of doing things, that means they have a way to repeat it, to make it consistent, to make it like part of the lifeblood of this team. Why, as cheesy as it is, as cringe as it is, heat culture is a real thing. Maybe it's got some dings in it right now. Maybe it's not as strong as everyone thought it was a few years ago. But the teams that are successful year after year, whether they give it a name or not, they have this. And the Magic seem to understand, or at least their bosses, the management, seems to understand there is a standard now. The bar has been raised, but there is still a standard and a basic precept this team has to meet. And that's what they're working on here early on in training camp. Of course, we can't take our eyes too far off of what's going on the court or looking ahead to what we want to see. It's time to talk about some lineups that would just be fun to see. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, I see you over there, doing your thing. It's, Thursday, almost, Thursday night football, Bucks Falcons. I see you over there. You can start the week, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of that game tonight, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You want to get in on the action for tonight's game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Atlanta Falcons, a huge game in the NFC South. Well, I just pulled up this FanDuel Sportsbook page. They got a parlay going right now with any Bijan Robinson touchdown with the Atlanta Falcons, any Mike Evans touchdown, Kirk Cousins plus 225 yards, and Baker Mayfield plus 225 yards at plus 800. That's passing yards, by the way. At plus 800 means if you bet $10, you will win $80. That's exciting. If NFL is not your game or you want something a little more simpler than a parlay, the Bucks are 1.5-point underdogs at Atlanta for Thursday night football. They also have great offers on the Magic, including an over/under of 47.5 for their win total. They have them at the favorite to in the Southeast Division at -140. And if you're ready for it, 21 days away, just 3 weeks away from opening night in Miami, the Heat are favored by 1 point over the Orlando Magic. You can find all these great offers and more. Plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So obviously, I think what a lot of us are interested in is this team has a lot of sameness. Like, not a good thing, not a bad thing. They have a lot of sameness. And I think a lot of us can predict what the Magic are going to try to do when the season begins. Like, I think a lot of us can predict the rotations. Like, I hear your jokes. I had a few people ask me who's wearing what jersey when we walked into training camp. And I took a photo and people started parsing jersey colors. Please stop that. That's not relevant, especially at this point. But the highlights that they've shown us, the highlight clips that the Magic social media team has put on socials are the lineups you expect. Paolo, Franz, Dell, Jalen, and KCP in the black jerseys as the starters, going up against Cole, AB, Mo Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, and it looks like Gary Harris in some of those videos. And the white jerseys as the bench group with Jett Howard and Tristan Da Silva kind of going in and out, and all the E10 guys wearing magenta jerseys or whatever, or not magenta jerseys, wearing red jerseys or green jerseys. Like, don't read too much into this at this point. We're still very, very early. But I will say this. I do think while right now we should be focused on the basics, and you should be testing things out in training camp. I wouldn't necessarily test things out in preseason, but we are eager to see the Magic try some new lineups. We are eager to, this team boasts this super versatile group. Like, that is one of the precepts of the Magic way, is you play multiple positions, that you're capable of defending multiple positions and being everywhere on the floor. Like, that is a big, big part of who the Magic are. And, as a rebuilding team, I think it is good to have narrowly defined roles and allow players to grow. But I think one thing, and I won't say this, and the playoffs was a problem, but one thing I think we all want to see is Jamal Mosley be willing to experiment a little bit. Dictated by matchups, of course, but be willing to try out different lineups and see if they can create an advantage. After all, one thing that this Magic team has said already, I think Tristan Da Silva said this on Tuesday, it's hard to create offensive advantages against this defense because the defense is so long. They can switch. They can defend multiple positions, really 1 through 5 in that starting lineup. It's a challenge to play this Magic team already. And let's say you add Jonathan Isaac into that starting group somehow, that seemingly would only get greater. I think obviously a lot of people are trying to shoehorn Jonathan Isaac into the starting lineup as the starting center. And now that he is up to a listed 240, a stated 250, there is at least some thought that he could bang around in the post a little bit more. I am still a little skeptical of that. But we saw, Jonathan Isaac said this during media day, actually. Give him more time to learn the center position. Give him more, that they kind of sprung that on him and he had to learn it on the fly. I imagine in training camp, he has spending at least some of his time working with the centers and drilling with their defensive drills and drilling with their offensive drills in anticipation that he will play not a ton, but some minutes at center like he did at the end of last season. Give Jamal, again, I think people were critical of Jamal Mosley's rotation decisions, how he didn't go back to young players, how he didn't kind of sprinkle some of those young players in so that they'd be ready. He kind of got stuck in his 10 men by the end of the season because he just hadn't used anybody else. But give him that credit. He went with that Jonathan Isaac experiment later in the year, stuck with it, went to it in the playoffs, even though I didn't think it was a good decision. And the numbers maybe bear that out. But there's definitely a push and definitely an idea to have Jonathan Isaac play some center minutes. The Magic are going to be able to experiment with lineups like this all the time. They could do like an oops all arms lineup of J.I., Franz, Tristan, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Jalen Suggs. Like, that's maybe not my favorite lineup, but that's a lot of arms. That's a lot of length and a lot of guys who are versatile enough to do stuff with the ball and attack. As long as I think you have one of Paolo or Franz, and again, I think this is where the rotations are going to have to change a little bit. The Magic can run a 10-man rotation. I don't have a problem with that. They probably need one of Paolo or Franz on the floor at all times, unless Jalen Suggs is a more efficient attacker unless Cole Anthony is a better attacker off the dribble. You just need someone who could attack a little bit off the dribble. But even on the other end of the spectrum, I think a lot of people look to these like small lineups with J.I. at center or Paolo at center. The Magic could go with a big lineup. They could go like Wendell, Mo, J.I., Franz, Jalen Suggs, or, I don't think they'd go Kentavious Caldwell-Pope there. I think you need at least a nominal ball handler. They could go AB. They could go Anthony Black there. What's exciting about this Magic team is, well, yes, there are traditional positions. Yes, there are ideas that we've seen this team work through and seen this team succeed with that they shouldn't deviate too much from. Like, again, what they did work last year. Like, yeah, they were plus 4 points per 100 possessions. They had some lineups that didn't work over the course of the season, but their starting lineup was a positive. Not one of the absolute best starting lineups in the league, but a very solid starting lineup in the league once they settled on it. And if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is at the very least a better version of Gary Harris, that should make that lineup even better. I think he is more than a better version of Gary Harris. He can be that. I want him to do more than that. Their bench group, honestly, their bench group's the part that concerns me because I think losing Markelle Fultz and Joe Ingles is going to be a bigger deal than people are letting on, at least in the regular season. But that bench group was still very productive too. The Magic were like a very far above 500 team based only off their statistics and net rating. Now, again, there's things they got to continue to work on. It's not just roll things back. You got to be willing to tweak. You got to be willing to kind of find advantages where you can find them. And you got to be willing to try different combinations out there on the floor. But again, that's what's exciting about this team. Give me your best 5-man lineup. Seriously, give me your dream 5-man lineup. I could probably go find a lineup that was similar to it last year that frankly worked. And that's the fun of this Magic team is the Magic can really throw all 5 guys out there. Jeff Weltman, I think, said this really, really succinctly when asked about the point guard question during media day. He said, our project is kind of different. We're not viewing positions the same way that other teams may view positions. Our positions are pretty fuzzy. And we have 2 6'10" ball handlers. Like, they believe that. They believe Paolo and Franz can give them matchup advantages as lead ball handlers. And the Magic didn't want to deviate too much from seeing how that group grows. But again, that's like the heart. Again, I think about it this way. To win a championship, you've got to do something unique. You got to have a player who is heads and tails better than pretty much everyone in the league, an all-NBA type player, but you've also got to do something the best that no one else is doing. There's no other Nikola Jokic. There's no other Luka Doncic. The Timberwolves were the best defense in the league last year. That the Magic are different, and the Magic distinguish themselves from the other teams in the league because they took the idea of positionless basketball and said, okay, we can act, again, it's that's that random scout last year that said it. The Magic were the team that said, F it. We're going to be positionless. We're going to actually do it. And again, as long as it's working, you stick with it. And that's what the Magic are doing. And again, because they're doing that, their lineups are wide open. Like, honestly, I could see a world where Anthony Black isn't asked to be a point guard. Like, he's talked about it more. He's trying to attack off of 2 feet more. He's trying to be more of a playmaker. He thinks he didn't really show his playmaking last year. I think AB is going to take a big step up this year. And again, the Magic are putting a lot on his plate, and he's going to have that opportunity to step up. But the Magic have the lineups and the ability to make all of this happen. It's really, really exciting. I have a list of lineups on Orlando Magic Daily. If you want to take a look at those, I'll try and share them as well. Give me your favorite 5-man lineups. I want to know what you're thinking. What 5-man lineup? Give me your crazy 5-man lineup. Forget the normal stuff. Give me a crazy 5-man lineup. Name that lineup. I'll try and share some of my favorites if you send them to me at @PhilipR_OMD or in the comments below. I'll try and share some of my favorite crazy lineups that aren't so unrealistic with this Magic team, to be perfectly honest. So we've been dancing around it a little bit. Second day of training camp. I'll give you some observations from training camp coming up here in just a moment. Like I said, right now, And so excuse me for this. If you're unhappy with the questions being asked at media availabilities right now. Right now, we just don't know a lot. We're kind of fishing. We got all our big issue questions done at media day. We're trying to figure out what's going on behind closed doors. And love Jamal, my dude, my guy. He is very good at saying enough, but not saying anything. And that's what he's supposed to do. Like, he's a good coach. He's very good with the media. He's our guy. We are not going to learn very much. And frankly, I'm not even expecting to learn very much until Monday's game against the Pelicans. That first preseason game, favorite coachism. We'll talk more about it on tomorrow's episode about what to expect in that preseason game. But we'll talk more about it on Monday's episode of Locked On Magic, what to expect in that preseason game. But every coach will tell you it's an extension of training camp. They're not going to put a lot of stock into it. 1:30 tip-off. I am not convinced the Magic are going to play their starters very much, just because it's an off-rhythm game. They've got a busy week. They play Wednesday, Friday as well. They play 3 games next week, and then they get a week off. We'll see. We'll see. I am a little skeptical we'll learn very much in that game, but maybe I'm just lowering your expectations so that if they suck, that I can brush it away as nothing. But I don't think that'll be the case, actually. I think the Magic will be very, very good. Wednesday, the second practice did bring reportedly more scrimmaging. We heard that they played some 3-minute games in the Tuesday practice, short games, just trying to get conditioning up, not quite ready to go up and down as much yet. Wednesday brought scrimmaging. And while we don't know who performed well or whatnot, something has been repeated. It's something that I mentioned a little bit yesterday. Everyone's been really impressed with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has definitely shined in these early games, or in these early practices. He has delivered, frankly, exactly what the Magic hoped they would get. Like, they thought they were getting a veteran who knew what he was doing, would impart wisdom to younger players. They're getting the kind of player that they hoped they'd be getting. And that is obviously what they're looking for from him, and obviously what they're looking for in signing him. But Paolo Banchero said after Tuesday's practice, he's like a step or two ahead. Like, defensively, he knows what's coming quicker. And that's obviously something everyone's really excited about. Kentavious, KCP, Kenny, as he's being called, he wants to be called Kenny. Kenny is told us on media day that he's really excited because this is a team that actually wants to defend. He's really, really excited about that prospect. But it's hard to know. We don't know yet. We're watching some shooting drills. I did make a point to watch Franz shoot. He was not missing very much. I do think that his shot, I don't think he dramatically changed his form. I don't want to read too much into it, but it looks a lot more fluid. It looks like he's getting his shots up more consistently. It seems like the work that he did on his mechanics was more about kind of fluidity. He has a very chinny shot, kind of releases it below his chin as he's going up. So the angle is a little bit flatter. Sam Vecini of game 3 during the offseason hypothesized that that's why he's kind of up and down. I did a quick look at his numbers, and he does go through some not wild swings, but there were definitely some swings where it's like, okay, he's shooting really well right now. Oh, he's not shooting very well right now. Maybe that's just normal. And so it's just, what is level for him. But shooting drills, take them for what they were. The drills that we watched in the final 5 minutes of practice, he was making a lot of threes. And I think, Franz did mention that he spent a lot of time working on his mechanics. The FIBA court is different. The FIBA basketball is different. So, he didn't shoot particularly well at the Olympics, but the NBA is a different animal. It's different spacing. So hopefully that shot is resolved, and we'll all overreact to what happens on Monday. Other than that, it's, hard to say what else is going on. Like, I wish I had more to report. Everyone's kind of keeping a tight lip. Competition's been high. Spirit's been high. Jamal Mosley does seem to be pleased with the progress that they're making. They're accomplishing what they want to accomplish in these practices. Ultimately, that's what you want to hear. Again, the way a lot of these practices work, especially the early practices, they plan training camp. The coaching staff plans training camp practices way in advance. They put down on their note cards what they want to see, what they want to get done every day. They work through their drills. They work through their instruction. They work through their teaching. They get their work done, and then they, pack up and go home. And I think they're still doing 2 sessions here. The first session, the morning session, is contact. The evening session is usually instruction, kind of walk through, putting in shells, putting in some base offense and kind of walking through it. It's not meant to be super intense. The day of 2-a-days are gone. But anyway, if you do 2-a-days, I don't know if this is still the rule, but it used to be the rule. You can only do contact in one of the 2 practice sessions in the preseason or in training camp. So I don't know if that's still the rule anymore, but that's kind of where we're at in the process. Again, I want to repeat this. If you don't know how a practice works or how training camp works, first off, welcome to the show. We love you. Thanks for joining us. You're not going in and making these gigantic tweaks and introducing these gigantic new concepts very early in training camp. Right now, it is about establishing your baseline, establishing your foundation, and then reinforcing that foundation. You play, you get up and down, you expect mistakes on day 1. Day 2, you come back, you see what's been retained, you expect fewer mistakes. There's still going to be some mistakes, but you expect fewer mistakes. You hope to move through things quickly, get more playing time, see where guys are at, especially work on conditioning, and then move on from there. Those evening sessions are where you really begin to install stuff. And frankly, the way that I understand things, you're still installing offense into the first quarter of the season. Depending on the identity of your team, you install your base offense so you can actually function in live situations and do basic things in live situations. But knowing this Magic team, they're probably more focused on their defense and accomplishing what they want to do defensively and getting their basics down defensively than they are offensively. And while I think they hope to be a better offensive team, they know defense is where the bread is buttered. And so I would suspect that they will be working more on offense. They'll probably, the way the schedule works out next week, they have a game Monday in New Orleans, a game Wednesday in San Antonio, and then they're back home Friday again, I believe against New Orleans again next Friday. Then they don't play another game for a week until Friday against the Sixers. I imagine they'll take Saturday off. Please take Saturdays off. I like my college football. And I got to cover UCF game next Saturday. They take Saturday off, come back Sunday, correct mistakes from the last week, come back Monday, continue to correct mistakes, and then really begin to drill and add new layers to the offense and defense over the course of that last week. I truly think this week is about defense and setting the defensive foundation. That's who this Magic team is. That's what they want to reinforce. That's what they want to build on. And again, this week, you're just building your foundation. You're building that initial building block that's going to hold the whole season up. Think about each practice, each game as another layer you're adding to this building. You start at the bottom. As much as I love playing Jenga, I love taking a piece from the bottom at the very beginning, but you want a strong base if you're going to build a tower that's going to get you to May and June. And again, that's where we're trying to get to. So the stronger your base is, the stronger your foundation is today, the better off you're going to be in April, the better off you're going to be in May, and the better off, hopefully, you're going to be in June. And that's, I think, what's going on at training camp. Again, I don't have that much inside information to share. We don't get to see very much. We're not watching scrimmages at this point. It isn't Scott Skiles and Frank Vogel who let us watch scrimmages toward the end of practices on the first couple of days. This is what I would imagine is happening with the Magic at training camp. And obviously we'll keep tabs. I'm at training camp every day. We'll keep tabs on what they're doing and how they move forward from here. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the full you download podcasts to your favorite podcast-enabled device. You can also check us out on YouTube by subscribing at youtube.com/@LockedOnMagic. And remember, this Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to do my episode live. I'll recap the Magic's game against New Orleans Pelicans, what we learned, what we didn't see, everything else that happened, everything that may or may not matter a week from now. We'll talk about it all live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday after the Magic's game against the New Orleans Pelicans. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, though, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, including more stuff from training camp, check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. Now that you're done listening to Locked On Magic, for your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Basketball. I know you all got your fantasy basketball drafts coming up. I know I have one coming up. Become a fantasy basketball expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Josh Lloyd. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic. This has been Phil Rossman-Wright. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.